Hello and welcome. Thank you for coming to today's Atticus Advantage webinar, the 4 Parasites Eating Away Your Practice's Growth. My name is Mike Wells and I'll be the organizer on today's call. And just a few logistics to go over with you before we get going with our topic. So first, I just want to give you a little bit of background information about Atticus if you're not familiar with us. Atticus was founded in 1989 to provide in-depth ongoing support and accountability programs for lawyers and law firms that effectively help you increase your revenue and income, reduce the stress and the time that you spend in the office, give you a greater sense of career satisfaction, and more importantly, allow you more time with your family and your personal interests. If you've been to any of our workshops or webinars and you later realized you could benefit from some further help in implementing change in your practice, the best way to accomplish that would be to see if you qualify for enrollment in our practice growth program, which meets quarterly for 2 days. If you're unsure whether a group program is the right solution for you, we highly recommend that you start talking to us about a practice growth diagnostic to help determine an individual course of action that will foster significant growth in your law firm. And for further information, you can contact us at the email address on the screen, hello@atticusadvantage.com. To ask a question during today's session, you can do that a couple different ways. You can use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard to send a message to the event organizer, that's me. If you'd like your question to remain anonymous, please indicate so in your message. The other way is to click the hand icon on your dashboard to indicate that you have a question or a comment, and during the end part of the session, we'll call on you and unmute you so that you can be heard by everyone listening in. Today's presenter is attorney and practice advisor Steve Riley. Steve has been coaching attorneys for over 20 years and has owned and sold his own practice. He focuses his coaching on a limited number of top producing attorneys across the country, and his practice techniques have long been utilized by many organizations beyond Atticus, including several specialty organizations for estate planning, elder law groups, and state bar groups. So without further ado, I'd like to hand this over to Steve, and we can begin.
Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Steve Riley, and I get the pleasure of doing today's webinar, facilitating today's webinar with you. And the big question is, what are we talking about today? And I have to tell you, I've been really looking forward to teaching this particular webinar. It's one of my favorites. And we're really talking about the 4 key parasites that will eat away at your firm's growth. And a parasite, in this definition, is something that you don't know there. It's a parasitical relationship with your practice, and it drains it of energy, cash. It drains you of energy, cash, and it really can hurt your practice, but sometimes it's so small you don't see it. And if you're a solo or small firm attorney, it's usually something that's just draining you, and you either ignore it, or it's a blind spot, or you just hope it goes away, like it'll get better on itself, on its own. And when we're really looking at this, we really want to focus on just 4. There may be 20 different parasites that could really hurt your practice, but we really limit it to particularly 4. And so when we look at this, I want you to really pay attention to see if any of these parasites might be in your firm. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about what those 4 parasites are. We're going to talk about first, how do you detect them? What are the symptoms of that parasite? And then what are some of the ways that you can eradicate the parasite? Now, there's not always going to be one cure for a parasite. You may have to take a couple courses of action to eliminate the infestation of what you're dealing with. But typically, the symptoms will be evident to you. So as we're working together on this today, I want you to pay attention and say, do I have those symptoms? Are those symptoms evident in my practice? And then, while we recommend some cures, the cures may not be the best cure for you. And in that case, you may want to talk to us about doing a practice growth diagnostic or doing a further course of action. But the key here is to just start to look at and ask, are those symptoms in my practice? Or worse, are those symptoms in my practice, and I'm going to ignore them? So I just want to be really clear today. I want you to take some form of action. If you're in one of our programs, you're working with a coach already, or you're in the practice growth program and dominate your market, don't hesitate to share with your coach and or your resource advisor what you learned from today's webinar, which parasite is there. That might be in the way for you. But if you're not working with one of our coaches or working in one of our programs, you're going to have to take the recommendations and try and apply them yourselves. In fact, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a gift. I think I'm going to give you the opportunity to have a quick conversation with somebody on our customer services team that may help you narrow the parasite and come up with a quick course of action. That's exactly what I'm going to do. So we'll talk towards the end of the webinar about how we can do that. We're going to walk through the key questions to ask yourself. And then number 3, what is our most important recommendation to you to move forward with whatever this issue is? Now, whenever we talk about this, whenever I'm doing a program for a bar association or another association or talking to lawyers about this in public, they're usually like, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. This parasite thing that I've got is, well, it's no big deal. It's not a bad thing. I've got a bad employee. She's been with me for a while. I really quit managing her because she's like, quote, part of the family, and I've gone from hiring and managing to adopting her. And when she's late, it irritates me, but I don't want to say anything because it'll upset her. And that's when it moves from a cute little parasite to something evil. And it's something that you couldn't be more wrong about, because if you're managing by adopting and you are, quote, friends with everybody in your firm, the all-stars, the great performers, realize that you don't get ahead by being an all-star. You get ahead by being a suck-up. You get ahead by manipulating and managing up to the owner. And it becomes a parasite. It drains your practice of cash. It drains your practice of energy. And in this particular example, it drains your practice of talent. So as we walk through each one of these, I want you to ask yourself, is this really a cute little one? Or is this something that I have to be really serious about and ask myself, is it doing damage to my practice? Because once you attract a parasite, it's going to feed on the practice from the inside out. You're not going to see it without doing, like working with somebody who can identify it. You're typically not going to see it, and it's just going to continue to hurt the practice, and your practice will suffer over time. And you will hope to God, or hope that you can ignore it, but the truth is it will continue over time to make things worse and worse and worse. And sometimes you think you can just ignore it. You think you can just ignore it because it's not a big deal. You can stick your head in the sand because it's something small and tolerable. But in truth, the reality is it can be very, very vicious. It can do tremendous damage to your practice long term. For example, the bad employee that I used earlier, there's nothing quite as chronic or cancerous long term to your firm as a bad staff member. They may be great at skills. They may be a prima donna as an attorney or paralegal. They may be something that's just really, really remarkable, but they're terrible with the rest of the team. They're hard on clients, and they're obnoxious to deal with. Over time, they destroy the culture of your firm and cause tremendous negativity. So you start to have to manage around the prima donna. You have to manage around the cancerous employee. And over time, that hurts your profits. It hurts your relationships with your clients. It hurts your relationships with your referral sources. And it hurts your ability to keep really great people on your firm. So as we walk through this, be honest with yourself. All progress in life begins when you tell the truth about things. So be honest with yourself. So are you ready for some actual help? How can we get down and start digging and looking at these particular issues? Just remember, the reason that we're talking about this is that we're trying to help you focus on the growth of your practice. We're not in the business of telling you how to be technically better in the courtroom. We're not in the business of technically telling you how to draft a better trust, because quite frankly, if you've been practicing for more than 5 to 10 years, in my experience, you're about as legally technically legally, from a legal and technical perspective, about as good as you're going to get. You pretty much, if you've got 5 to 10 years of experience in a particular field of law, you're about as good as you're going to get. Anything else beyond that is going to be a 10 to 15% marginal improvement. If you've been a solo practitioner for 5 to 10 years and you haven't focused on your business skills, what will start to happen is that your revenues will cap out. They'll hit a ceiling. And as your costs rise and your revenue continues to cap, your net income gets squeezed. So when we look at this, we're really trying to get you to look at what we consider the 4 cornerstones of a healthy practice. We call these the 4 cornerstones of practice growth. Number 1 is focusing on your cash flow and profitability. Has nothing to do with your legal technical skills, has nothing to do with whether you can do a good deposition or draft a terrific motion or, make the best charitable remainder trust on the planet. None of that matters. But your ability to price, manage your cash flow, and understand your numbers can make a tremendous difference on whether you have a sick practice or a healthy practice. It's amazing to me how many times I ask a lawyer, well, what's your overhead? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, why don't you know? Because I don't want to know. It sickens me every time I find out how much money I'm spending on overhead. That's a sign of an unhealthy practice. This is someone who's not focusing on one of the 4 skills to building a healthy practice. Number 2, client development. Sometimes it's also known as marketing. How do we get great clients in the door? Once again, it's a skill. Any lawyer can learn this skill. I don't care. Some people are more naturally inclined at this particular skill, but anyone can learn this. And you can get clients in the door through doing referral-based marketing or, quite frankly, doing advertising, via search engine optimization or anything that you want to do on the internet. 3, the ability to hire, manage, and groom great team members. Critical difference. In some cases, it is the ultimate game changer in some firms. A good solo practitioner can probably get up somewhere between 3 to 6 employees, sometimes as much as 10 employees, but their ability to manage at that point in time is what controls the growth of the firm, or I should say their inability to manage at that point in time controls the growth of the firm. So if they're trying to move beyond 3 to 6 employees or maybe up to 10 employees, you'll see a lot of solos. They'll go up in employees and go back down in employees, go up in employees and go back down in employees. And they think what's going on is that their inability to market, their inability to get good clients is what's causing the growth and the shrinking, It's not. It's managing. It's their ability to find, train, and manage great people. That's the blind spot for that particular symptom or problem. And then, of course, time management and focus. I'm telling you what, your ability to focus and manage your time is really the game changer for most lawyers. Their ability to find and manage their time for most lawyers. So what you're going to discover, these are basically going to be the 4 areas that you're going to see that your parasites will dig down and consume your profitability, consume your confidence, and consume your energy. So let's look at it. What's gotten inside your practice? Let's look at the first symptoms. Look for anywhere that you see income being stagnant or shrinking. Look for anywhere that you see income or referrals intake withering. Look for anywhere that you might consider your team to be part of the walking dead. They move slowly, consume a lot, but don't contribute a lot. And anywhere that your day, week, or month feels out of control, these are usually going to be indicators that we need to dig a little bit deeper because your practice is sick. If you're working weekends, you're working a 60 to 70-hour work week, it is a sign that your focus and time management is out of control. It's a sign your practice is sick, and you're ultimately going to be sick yourself. So here are the 4 parasites. We're going to first talk about the symptom. I'm going to give it a name, and then we're going to give you a recommended cure. So parasite number 1. Your revenue per case is small, meaning that if you looked at your past 50 cases, your past 100 cases in a particular area, and you added up the gross revenue and you divide it by the volume of cases, then you have a revenue per case. So for example, if you're an estate planning attorney and you did 50 cases and your revenue for those 50 cases is $500,000, then we could easily back in that our revenue per case is $10,000. But if we start to look in other practice areas that say our will part of our practice, or maybe uncontested divorce part of our practice, and we may have 50 of those cases, but our actual revenue per case is small, like $300 or $450 or $500. We've got to look at what's going on there. Why in one particular area is our revenue per case so dramatic and another area so small? Number two, when you start to say, oh my God, who's on the phone? Oh Lord, oh goodness, okay, should I take this call or shouldn't I take this call? Can I tell my assistant a good enough excuse to tell the person, in this case the client, something so I don't have to talk to them right now? Or you worse, get an email, and you get that email like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon where your stomach turns and you're nauseated and you're like, oh my God, it's them, it's them. Or you have people that owe you money. You have past due accounts receivables. And you look at it and you go, wow, you know, my AR is growing, and instead of doing anything about that, you're hoping that people will pay you versus taking some type of action to get people to pay you. And you're getting very few client referrals. You know, you look at it and you say, man, over the past year, less than 10% or 20% of my referrals came from clients. Michael, would you do me a favor? I'm picking up a lot of noise, and let's go ahead and mute everybody who's not with us. Okay, thanks. So if you're getting if you're looking at any of these particular parasites, any particular symptoms, what is the parasite? What is behind this that's causing the problem? Well, more than likely, it's going to be what we call bad client-itis. So this is really a sign that we have a lawyer that's done a bad job selecting clients. They're taking anything that's coming in the door, and they may be taking anything that's coming in the door for 3 reasons. Number one, they're desperate for cash, like they need money, so they're taking bad cases. 2, they may not actually think through, and they may not have a screening process to take cases, appropriate cases. And number 3, they may be really worried about hurting the feelings of the client, or really worried about hurting the feelings of the referral source to reject the case. So they're taking bad cases and bad clients. Number 2, they might be, when you look at this, if you are taking bad clients or bad cases, they're like vampires. They're parasites. They're going to suck the lifeblood out of you. They're going to suck the lifeblood out of your team. So if you're really having any of these symptoms, then more than likely these symptoms are going to be related to bad client selection. So one of the things that you can do is start to ask yourself, wow, am I having those symptoms? If so, why is this occurring? Now, sometimes this is also a byproduct of parasite number 2, which we'll get to in a second. But if this is the case, what are the cures? Well, we have 2 or 3 cures for you today. Number 1, immediately, there's nothing better than doing this. Please, and I really don't care if they owe you money, because more than likely they're not going to pay you anyway. That's been my experience from my practice. If I've got somebody who owes me money, more than likely they'll never pay me, especially if they got referred in by a friend or family member. They're the worst clients. So what you want to do today, and one of the things I'm going to have one of the client service advisors call you, and when they call you, my request is that you tell them who you're going to fire today. So if you have a bad client, fire them. Even if you don't think you have a bad client, they might be a mediocre client, fire them. And if you're not sure who that person is, go ask your staff. Because I promise you, your staff will quickly, immediately point out to you who that bad person is. And so get rid of them. Do it today. Number 2, immunize yourself. One of the most powerful ways of improving your practice and distinguishing eliminating some of these symptoms is distinguishing between a great case, an A client, or a D client or case. So what we've done for you, just as a gift, I thank you for attending. And if you've got any questions about how to utilize these tools when you talk to the client services team, they'll be able to explain them to you, is that we've given you 3 tools that you can download off the GoToWebinar dashboard. Number 1 is a client intake evaluation matrix form. And what that basically allows you to do is, if you look at A, B, C, and D, what I want you to do is say, look, what is a client look like to me? What's their personality like? What's the type of case? What's the case value? Is it collectible or not? What's the referral source like? Or did I get them off the internet? And what's the client expectation? So just this takes about 15 minutes to do. Download the form, fill out the form, scratch it out, capture any notes that you have, and then what I would suggest you do is get with your assistant or your team and do the same exercise again with them, so they can actually give you the benefit of their feedback. It's amazing what you're going to learn from them from their viewpoint. Now, if you're in the PI industry, if you're a personal injury lawyer, or if you're a family law lawyer, we've given you 2 already, one that we use for our PI lawyers, the personal injury edition of this worksheet. And if you're in the family law business, we also have given you a family law version of this. So download those. If you're not in one of those 2 particular industries, by all means, download those, look at them so you can get a feel for how those particular practice areas scored when they did an initial intake or initial matrix. So that is symptom number 1, bad client-itis. Parasite number 2. You're unable to say no to bad cases because you need the cash. I call this pay the rent law. When they come in, you're like, oh, I got to pay the rent. I'll take the case. You're lucky. I'm an expert in that particular field right now. So if you're unable to say no to bad cases because you need the cash, or you're afraid that there won't be a good case coming around the corner, you've got probably the second form of parasite, Parasite 2, which we'll explain in a second. Number 2, you're focused on doing the work versus looking how to upgrade your client base and referral base. I was just on the phone this morning with a remarkable practitioner, and one of the things that we were discussing was a dear friend of theirs who was looking at a really serious problem from the bar for failure to supervise. And what they had done is they had an employee, a long-term paralegal, 10 to 15-year paralegal, get behind on casework and forged a few judges' signatures on orders in order to process work. And they weren't major things. They didn't steal money, but they were just forging signatures on judges' orders. Now, while some of you are throwing up in your trash cans thinking about that, I want you to listen to me for a moment. How did that happen? How did that happen? The lawyer was too busy focusing on doing the work in front of them versus how to manage their practice. They were not paying attention to the business side of the practice. So if you're thinking, well, I'm such a damn good lawyer, I'm so good, I'm so remarkable, people are just going to flood in the doors because I'm such a good lawyer, it won't matter after a period of time, because what's really going to make the game-changing difference for you, your clients, will be your ability to run the business effectively. One of those skills is how to upgrade your client base and referral base over time. Because if you've been doing this for a period of time, in my case 25 to 30 years, I don't want to be doing the same work I did as a first-year lawyer. I want to have something more interesting, more profitable, much more stimulating than what I was doing 30 years ago. But if I have the same skills as a first-year lawyer, a fifth-year lawyer, or even a 10th-year lawyer for marketing, I'm not going to get that kind of quality of work. So you have to think about, how do I constantly upgrade my marketing and referral skills over time? If you're focused on just being, quote, a greater lawyer and not looking at the business side of this, you're never going to get those better cases. This is where a lot of you get annoyed with other lawyers that are getting great work and they're not as good as you are. It's because they're focused on the business side of how to get great work in the door versus the legal technical side of how to do great work. And number 3, you're too busy. Just too busy. Steve, you don't understand. I am just too busy to do even one marketing activity a week. I'm just too busy, man. I just got too much to do. If that's the case, you probably have what we call scared of marketing-itis. Scared of marketing-itis is usually a symptom where you're not getting good, it's usually because you're not getting good clients because you're not doing any form of active, proactive referral-based marketing. And if you're not doing any referral-based marketing, and maybe usually two reasons, and these are the two reasons that we've heard over and over, I've heard for 20 years. Number one is I don't know what to say, I don't know who to say it to, and I don't know how to say it. Now, I want to hang here with you for a minute. That's a skill. That's just learning how to say something, knowing exactly who to say it to, when to say it, and how to say it to get business. That's not a God-given talent. That is just a skill that you can be taught. So if you're not doing this and you're afraid of doing this, it's a skill. It's totally learnable. The next one is that you're afraid that you're going to look like a salesperson. You know, I don't want to look like Ned Ryerson in Groundhog Day. I don't want to look like, you know, a used car salesperson. I promise you, you won't. You won't. You just won't. I've been doing this for so long, I've yet to meet a lawyer that I'm like, oh my gosh, this person shows up like a used car salesperson. Rarely do they exist in the legal industry. Most lawyers go into the legal industry to avoid sales and marketing. Some even go in the legal industry to avoid people. So to find a lawyer that's kind of slimy, like a slimy sales character in a legal industry, it's impossible. I haven't found one yet. So this is just an internal conversation where you might be fearful. It really is, you know, it really is just an internal dialogue that you've got going. If you're afraid of that, you know, I would encourage you to let it go, because it's really not about looking like a salesperson to sell something to someone. It's really a question of you getting out there and helping people that need your services. At the end of the day, the greatest salespeople are not great salespeople. They're great communicators, and they're great at helping people get past whatever's holding them back in life. And some of the best lawyers that I've met in my life that are tremendous rainmakers don't perceive themselves as rainmakers. They perceive themselves as great communicators that are trying to make a difference in the world for their types of clients. So this is a mindset that holds you hostage here. So it's amazing the shift that we've seen people make over time and how it just causes a breakthrough in the practice. And last but not least, well, it can't be important. Marketing can't be important because they didn't teach me that in law school, which is one of the favorite ones I get, because most of the reason that professors go to law school so they don't have to learn how to market and learn how to practice law. They get to go do the academic side. So they're not going to teach it to you. It's not important to them. So if you're really a solo practitioner or a small firm lawyer, one of the most important skills for you to learn is how to market. And if you're scared of marketing-itis, you know, if you've got that parasite, there's a couple things that you can do to cure it. Number one is schedule at least one marketing activity per week. Just schedule one marketing activity per week. It could be anything as simple as meeting a new person, making a request of an existing referral source to introduce you to another potential referral source. But it's something that's going to cause you to move your practice forward just a little bit. And it'll give you the confidence and courage to start to do more marketing. Our recommendation is usually 3 marketing activities per week. Our studies have shown that the difference between a lawyer that does 1 marketing activity a week and 3 marketing activities a week is about $50,000 net income. Now, that may not be enough for some of you to be inspired to do 3 marketing activities a week, but that study is about 15 years old, so I imagine the number is a little bit higher now. But it's a activity when you're proactively trying to either develop a relationship or proactively trying to get work in the door. Now, I do want to distinguish one thing here, and I took a great big deep breath because I want to make sure that I communicate something to you. Going to lunch with a friend of yours that you've been going to lunch with for 10 years that may send you 1 or 2 cases per week, one or 2 cases per year, I would not define as a good marketing activity. I'm looking for either a new relationship or somebody that's looking to send you new business. So when I'm talking about new marketing activity, I don't want you doing something that you've been doing in the past over and over and over. So what I'm going to suggest that when our client services team calls you, I'm going to recommend that they ask you what one marketing activity you're going to take next week to move your practice forward, because you need the accountability. Number two is you can script and practice a way to ask for referrals or an introduction to someone that can refer you work. And you can do it ethically and authentically. You just need the practice. It's like preparing for a trial. You know, you're going to practice an argument. If you're preparing, maybe arguing a motion, you know, whether it's a bench trial or a jury trial, practicing and opening your closings. And you're, practicing those things are important. Same thing with asking for a referral or introduction. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend you script it out and you practice it so you feel comfortable with it. It's not something that I want you to wing. It's too important. It's something that you'll use all the time. So if you've done it 20, 50, 30 times, maybe 100 times, you might have it down. You don't need to script it anymore. But the key here is that you practice it so you feel confident about it. Absolutely crucial skill to learn. Great. Parasite number 3, symptoms. Constant interruptions, whether they're by phone, staff, email, or text. You feel rushed or late. More than likely somebody who's listening to this webinar later because they registered for it and then something came up and they couldn't attend the webinar on time. You're going home feeling there's not enough hours in a day, and the thing that was most important to me, I never got to. I never got to it. The thing that was number one to me, I never got to it. Too many things got in the way. And number 4 here is that your support team is not supporting you. You feel like they're working against you. You don't feel like you guys are rowing in the same direction. You feel like they're piling more and more work on, and they're not supporting you on this. So it's these elements of this, these symptoms, of this particular parasite are pretty chronic in most practices. So just, look at it for yourself. Where am I at with this? And here's another way of looking at these other symptoms of this particular parasite. Your office is a wreck. Healthy for me would mean that your office is showroom ready. And what I mean by that is that you can have a client walk into your office now and not be embarrassed. Most lawyers are using their desk and sometimes their credenza and often their floor as a to-do list. They're throwing stuff everywhere, and there's piles and piles and piles of stuff. It might be an empty Starbucks coffee can, Starbucks coffee cup over there. It might be a old newspaper article there, 4 or 5 feet of bar journals piled up in a corner. Yeah, so if your office is a wreck, it's a symptom of this parasite. Number 2, your inbox has multiple unopened emails because you're using them as a reminder or a to-do list. Healthy for me would be an inbox at 0. Yes, I realize some of you are freaking out going, there's no way I can do that. I'm going to say that you can. We have lawyers that may take them about a year to work to an inbox at 0 because they have to look at the systems, the processes, the procedures that are occurring with their communication between their staff and their client and their referral sources to drive to 0. They may get from 150 emails a day down to 10 to 15 to 20 emails a day, but that's a sign of a healthy practice. 3, you're more focused on just getting today done. You have no time to plan for any form of strategic element of your practice. You have no time to work on projects and improve your practice. You have no time to train your staff. You don't have time to do anything that might improve the vision of what you want your practice to be like in your head. And you feel like you're in reactive crisis mode. You feel like you're in reactive crisis mode. If you have any of these symptoms, you have a parasite that we call lack of management-itis. Lack of management. What do we mean by this? You're not taking time to think, plan, and put in place strategies to run your practice. It's running you. You've completely lost control of it. You're just running like a gerbil on a wheel, thinking that if you could run faster or harder, you're going to get somewhere. And this is an important one. This is probably the one that's a blind spot for a lot of practitioners. They don't get it. They just don't see it. They just think this is the way the world works. And it's how the world worked for the chronically sick practice. but it's not how the world works for a healthy, well-run practice. So if you're looking at your friends, you walk into one of your friends' practices and their offices are a wreck and there's Diet Coke cans on the floor and there's a dead plant in the corner and there's files everywhere. That doesn't mean it's normal. It means that you're hanging out with other chronically ill people. And the two of you giving advice to each other is probably not a good thing to do. It's like two sick people talking about how to get healthy. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So what do you do here? Well, there's three things that I can recommend to you. First, appreciate that there's kind of a phasing, or like locks. Like going through the Panama Canal, you go through locks. And it's kind of the same thing with improving your business skills. Your business skills must improve and evolve to support growth. The first thing that you have to get under control is managing yourself and figuring out, how do I get better control of managing my time, managing my focus, managing my emotions, managing my thinking. From there, you learn to manage your team. The second stage is managing them. And if you can manage yourself and manage your team, you can drive your firm for profitability. You can drive your more time off for you. You can get tighter about the type of cases you take. You can drive up, the type of clients that you take. So there's a lot of things that you can do through your team if you manage them well. And really, for some of the market dominant players, what they do is they learn to manage their managers, and their managers manage team under them. And these are some of the firms that have rapid periods of growth because they've trained their managers of how to run departments. And that's where you see lawyers really, really take off as business people and really, really have tremendous lifestyles and actually become darn good lawyers because they have more time to focus on the law because they're not running around putting out fires. So how do you get there? What are some of the ways that you get there? First and foremost, learn to say no. I'd say, say no to bad cases. Don't over-volunteer. I really think that a particular personality type that we see a lot love to over-volunteer, and get clear on what's a distraction. So say no to bad cases. Don't volunteer for everything. Pick one thing only to volunteer and get behind, and get clear what a distraction is, and start saying no to things that are not in alignment with what your goals are for your practice. Two, you got to make time to plan. I recommend, as a bare minimum, at least one quarterly day. So one day a quarter where you focus on, how do I move my practice forward? And number three, aim for small improvements. Every day say, what can I do for 15 minutes today to improve my practice? And I promise you, if you can do something for 15 minutes a day, you can do about anything for 15 minutes. Just try and start somewhere. Maybe it's a 15-minute sprint to clean your office. Maybe it's a 15-minute sprint to clean out your inbox. Maybe it's a 15-minute sprint to clean up a mess with a case or a client or a referral source. But just look for little ways that you can get small improvements moving and gain momentum from them. Parasite number 4. These are the symptoms. Too busy to change anything. Just too busy. I don't have time to listen to this guy rant on the webinar. Just too busy. I want to think about it. I want to think about this. I'm not sure whether I want to take any actions whatsoever. I'm going to read a book on this, or an article, then I'm going to call some of my friends to get their opinions on it. Or I'm going to Google stuff, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to Google stuff, and I'm going to read what others say, or I'm going to be on one of the many listservs I belong to and see what other lawyers say. And then, I've discussed this. I've discussed this for years with my friends. I've discussed this for years with my spouse. I've discussed this for years with my staff, but I've actually done nothing. So these symptoms are really, really important to look at, because you may have someone who's reading stuff. They might be organizing stuff. They might be talking to people, and they might be researching things, but most importantly, they're not doing anything. I call this head in the sand-itis. Head in the sand-itis. Basically, thinking about versus doing is the ultimate pleasure of a tremendously skilled procrastinator. Thinking gets you nothing. Organizing in certain situations gets you nothing. Doing is really what it's about. You really don't learn anything until you start doing something. And a lot of lawyers, we're thinkers, man. We're heavy conceptual thinkers. And consequently, we get confused. We think thinking is doing. It's not. The truth is nothing has actually changed after you've thought about something. Only when you put in place what you thought about does change occur. So thinking means nothing. It's probably the ultimate pleasure for procrastinators. What I want you to do is say, what am I going to do? That's really what matters. Life rewards action. And what are you going to do? So when you talk to the customer services team today, or client services team, I want you to tell them what you're going to do out of today's call, because that's really what matters. Thinking about stuff is like joining a gym to get in better shape, and believing that the joining is all you need to do. Not going, but joining is really what you need to do to get in better shape. So, here are the two suggestions here. Do something, anything, even if it fails, because you're going to learn from it. Quit thinking, do. And try, please try, not to be shocked if it works. If I could have $1 for every time if I could have $1 for every time I have somebody say, I tried it, I didn't think it would work, but I tried it anyhow, because you guys are the experts in this, and lo and behold, it worked. And I'll say something like, well, what were you doing before you tried it? Well, I thought about it. I thought about it for a good 5 to 10 years. But it wasn't until I talked to you that I actually took an action about this. So if you've been thinking about marketing for 5 to 10 years, or you've been thinking about firing that bad client, or you've been thinking about doing something to move your practice forward, do it. Do it. When you talk to our client services team, tell them what you're going to do, but take some action. Now here comes my most important recommendation. When our client services team calls you, I'm going to recommend to you that you tell them what parasite has infected you worst. Now this is an important thing, because it's going to force the issue from one part of your brain to another part of your brain where your prefrontal cortex resides, and it's going to start your brain on problem solving. It's absolutely important that when you trying to problem solve something, that you take 2 actions. You either speak about it or you write about it. Those are the 2 ways that engage the prefrontal cortex most powerfully, so that your brain starts problem solving. Number 2, what's your plan? And it doesn't have to be a massive 10-year plan. I want to know immediately what's the plan that you're going to take to try and eradicate this parasite, and what's the one action that you can take today to move that parasite out of your practice and eliminate the infestation. And tell us, how can we help? How can we help support you in getting rid of that parasite out of your life? Now, if you're not sure, and you're like, okay, Steve, I got it. I hear what you're saying. I understand that there's some issues I might want to address, but I don't know what to do. My recommendation is going to say, take a deeper look at your practice management skills and your leadership skills. And the easiest way to do that is to take a big step and commit to doing something like a practice growth diagnostic with us. What can we do through that diagnostic to help you really determine your profitability, determine what's holding you back, determine what's in the way. And there's 3 key elements of it. Number 1, you're going to do a practice survey to determine what is your current profitability, what is your team like, what's your time management like, and what's your marketing like. These 4 cornerstones are absolutely crucial to help you grow your firm and to make it prosperous. Number 2, a DISC assessment. Now, I personally thought this was a bunch of voodoo when I learned about it, that there was some type of assessment or some type of study about me that will impact how I practice. I am telling you right now, I have been converted. I've seen the light. Understanding your particular DISC assessment is a significant advantage for you in growing your practice. Because if you're strong in one particular domain of the DISC, you can plan and hire around that particular strength. Rather than trying to improve a weakness, you get to build your practice around your strengths, and the DISC gives you insight to where you're particularly strong in an area. The call is typically an hour long. Sometimes they run over depending on how it goes, and the investment for this is $295, a modest investment, which includes your DISC assessment. And it's going to be with one of our practice growth advisors, one of our client services leaders that can help you think through where these parasites might have your practice and where we can help you take your practice beyond where it's currently at today. If you're interested in doing that, the easiest way to do that is go to atticusadvantage.com and click Let's Get Started. And there's a really nice video up there that talks a little bit about the practice growth diagnostic and what you get out of it. And at the end of the day, you know, what your rate of returns probably should be out of that. But to click that, get started, and you can go ahead and register. Now, the one thing I do want to say about this is I'm going to recommend to you strongly that you don't do the 90-day Think About It program. It is one of the things that amazes me how many times I heard this over my career where I've had a lawyer come up to me and he says, well, you know, I sat in the same program 2 years ago that these two other lawyers did, lawyer A and lawyer B, and they hired you guys, and one's taking 4 weeks off this year and the other one's, you know, triples income. But I sat through the same workshop that they did and I got nothing out of it. And I said, well, what have you been doing for the past 2 years? He goes, well, I've been thinking about what you said. I've been thinking about it. So I can't hammer you hard enough on this point. You know, you can't fail if you think about something, but you can't succeed either. You can't learn from it. You can't move it forward. You really, the only thing to do is encourage you to commit to some form of action, no matter how small. So when our client service advisors call you, just tell them what that action is. Say, I'm committing to this. This is the action I'm committing to. It doesn't necessarily mean work with us, but it's something that's going to move the practice forward, because that over time will gain momentum. Okay, so with that being said, I'd like to talk about upcoming Atticus Advantage webinars. If you enjoyed today's webinar, we have 3 more slated that are upcoming. Number 1 is lessons learned. So this is really terrific because the lesson learns are wonderful because they're basically success strategies that have been employed by Atticus graduates or Atticus clients that have allowed them to take their practices to the next level. So it's terrific because you get to hear me or one of the other Atticus advisors interview someone who's done something remarkable in their practice. The next upcoming one for that will be Wednesday, June 13th at noon. And then another favorite topic of mine, this will be June 27th, is the 10 big lies that stop growth. These are the 10 lies that lawyers tell themselves over and over and over and interact with them like they're true that prevent their firms from growing. And then September 13th at noon Eastern time, we have a really, really great one called the 5 worst financial mistakes made by law firm owners and what to do to avoid them. Cammie Hauser, who's one of our practice advisors, who is a CPA and worked as a CFO prior to joining our company, is going to walk through the 5 biggest mistakes she sees over and over and over that law firm owners make and what she can recommend to you to deal with those. Now, with that being said, if you've got a question, there's 2 ways of asking. Number 1, go to your chat function in the GoToWebinar dashboard and send a message to our event organizer, and they will be more than happy to read the question out. Or they can unmute you, and you can just ask me the question, and we can have a conversation about it. If you don't want your name to be used, our request is that you say, please don't use my name. Because every now and then someone goes, oh, I'd really want to be anonymous. Well, it's totally fine that you can be anonymous. Just let us know that you want to be anonymous. Otherwise, we'll interact with you based on your name. With that, Michael, I'm just going to check in, take a breath, and see if we have any questions.
We did have one question typed in, and I answered it to the attorney privately. They were asking if we advocated redoing the disc profiles periodically. And you know, every few to several years, it is something to consider because your profile can change based upon things you've been doing to adapt your behavior or your work style or your communication styles. That's the disc portion of the diagnostic. The practice assessment portion, we actually recommend that you consider doing that annually, almost like a firm checkup, to measure your progress in terms of what you've been doing with your goals and whether or not you've actually addressed any issues you identified the year previously to give you some accountability on that.
I like that, Mike. I think those are terrific answers. The diagnostic itself is kind of like going to see, it's like a preventative maintenance process, going to see your doctor every year to make sure that you're healthy, and it's like a wellness check. So I really like that. Any other questions?
No, we don't have any questions. No hands raised and no other questions. Oh, wait, we had one more just pop in here. Here's one. How do you diagnose volunteering? Is that a parasite for your practice?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a terrific question. So I'm going to see if I can give you a short response. This is one of the major advantages to doing something like the DISC profile, because certain personality, certain DISC profiles will have a tendency to over-volunteer. And if you have one of those profiles, you'll find yourself, you know, on this committee, that committee, on this board or that board. Here's the 3 things I would recommend. If you're not making the money that you want, you're not having the time off that you want, and you feel kind of like crazy busy, then resign with dignity, complete whatever you can complete as a volunteer, and just pick the one thing that you love. Sometimes lawyers get volunteering confused with marketing, and they over-volunteer, and they do a lot of volunteering thinking that they're marketing, and they're really not, because they're not getting any business. The question is, are you getting business from doing those activities? If you're not, then you know you're wasting time, unless it's something that you really, really care about. So for me, I look at a lawyer's income. Are you making the money you want? Are you getting the time off you want? And how do you feel about stress? Are you really stressed out? If you are, then get rid of all your volunteering commitments except the one that you really care about. And if that's being the coach of your kid's sports team, so be it. Or if it's teaching Sunday school, so be it. Or if it's being on a board of college, so be it. But everything else goes. And you can either rank them or score them, but that's what I recommend. And it's amazing how many lawyers get caught in this trap, because you're talented, you're out in the community, you're a problem solver, and people will take advantage of that and suck you dry as much as possible to serve on any board that they can possibly get you on, to get on any committee they can possibly get you on, to get you to work for free as a lawyer as much as possible. And that's nothing against charities. It's just you determining what are the best boundaries for your life and your practice. So hopefully that helps. But that's it's one of the chronic particular, I think chronic over-volunteering is a particular problem for those lawyers that have high influencer personalities in the DISC. So that's one of the advantages of doing the DISC, looking at see what your profile is and how it shows up. Anything else, Michael?
No, that's it. Thank you, Steve. Thank you to everybody else for joining us today. If you have any questions, you will be receiving a contact from us, from our customer services team. They can provide you with a link to download this if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your team, as well as copies of all the materials. And if you haven't already done so, make sure that you add our email address to your contact so that we don't end up in any folders we don't want to. That's hello@atticusadvantage.com and grow@atticusadvantage.com. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Steve.
Mike, one thing.
Yes.
One thing. one thing. So I just want those lawyers that are still with us at the end of the call, I want to thank you for the hard work that you do and the difference you make for your clients, the contributions that you make in your community. Our client services advisor, our client service advisors who reach out to you are really there to support you so you can make a bigger difference. When they call, take their call. And they'll say, Steve told me to call. So when they call, take their call because they're there to help support you. And this call's not going to cost you anything. They're going to ask you the questions that I put to you from today's webinar to see if there's any way they can help you make a bigger difference for your clients, a bigger difference for your family, a bigger difference for your community, and ultimately, live a happier life. So they're calling to help you do those things. So my suggestion is take the call, and they will probably say, Steve Riley asked me to call from the webinar. So if they call, take the call. That's it. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. We had one question come in. Karen, I'm going to have one of our customer service members contact you back with an answer to your question. I'm sorry that popped in a little bit after I had closed that out, but we'll get back to you, Karen. Thank you.